Simon's Universal Music. Here we are yet again. I've got a guest of the show who I've interviewed before, Jeff Slate. We're going to go straight into it. Jeff, it's wonderful to see you. Hey, fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. How are things in the UK?
The world seems to be ticking along in Britain and just wanting to get the world absolutely back to how it should be, I suppose.
Something. I mean, it's going to be a new normal, that's for sure, but some sort of normalcy would be nice. Yeah. I had a glimpse of it the other night. We did our first show here in New York City since March, last March 2020, and it was quite an experience. It wasn't completely full. It was limited capacity, but it was and people were sort of seated and distanced and that whole thing. But it was strange to be on a stage with a bunch of people and in a room kind of full of people, and by the end it felt kind of normal. But it's a shock to the system to go from literally seeing a handful of people to being in a room full of people, and after the show everybody wanted to say hi and all that. It was a strange experience, but it was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, only for myself and doing the line of work that I do, where you haven't done it for a long period of time and nobody's really been out in the hospitality world for a long time. Everybody wants to go out. Everybody wants to drink beer and whatever. It's been hard, man.
Yeah.
It's been physically, mentally hard.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It was like, how did I get I mean, I went through the rehearsal process and all that, but the one thing I did to sort of practice for being on stage was I stood a lot in the couple of days before, because I'm on my couch, I'm at my desk, I'm I go out and do whatever, but
yeah,
I knew I was going to have to stand for 3 or 4 hours, and I was, it was strange. I was rusty. Everybody was rusty, but it's like a bicycle. It's like muscle memory. It comes back, but it's psychologically weird, and it's also physically taxing in a way that we used to do this like it's nothing, and all of a sudden we have to relearn what we know how to do. So yeah, I get it.
Absolutely. So
what are we going to talk about today, Simon?
Well, we're going to talk about today. There's been the greatest hits come out, which is that. And I suppose, Jeff, since I started the channel a year ago, we've sort of mentioned his name along the way, right? But sure, never really done a full episode on him and really delved into him. Now, for someone that's obviously met him and is a fan of his as well, sure, I think it really is something special to talk to you about him, because sure, being the fan that I am and being the fan that you are, we can really go to town on like the 10 years that he's been around. So yeah, I think it's a great time for him to bring this out, and I think it's good. The set list is quite good, but what do you think about this?
I love it. I love the 2 new tunes. I think what's amazing to me is over the course of a 10-year period, he's done a lot. I think we forget, we sort of, these records come out on a sort of fairly regular basis, and then he tours and does a lot of interviews and whatever. And, for somebody who doesn't need to work, he has an incredible work ethic. And also, I think we're incredibly lucky that, for the folks who want the sort of Oasis nostalgia thing, Liam's doing that, really well. And for people who are Liam fans, they get a big dose of that in his shows, and his albums are sort of, right in that vein, but Noel has, the first album he has said, admittedly, to me and in other interviews, that album was made from sort of the leftovers of what he was writing for the next Oasis record, plus, you know, sort of whatever he came up with during the sessions, which showed sort of the next, you know, where he was headed. Then the second album, he sort of, you know, it sort of blossomed, and he kind of took things in a little bit different direction. There was a little more dance, there were a little more textures. He was using different instrumentation. You know, he joked with me when I interviewed him at the time of Chasing Yesterday that if he tried to put a saxophone on anything, you know, Liam would have, you know, smashed it. And, you know, it wasn't, he said to me that, you know, during the sessions for Dig Out the Soul, he mentioned something, you know, a track that he really wanted to do, or I can't remember exactly, people can look it up. And Liam said, well, that's just quirky and weird. And Noel thought, you know, I like quirky and weird. Right. So that was where they diverge. You know, Liam really, I mean, you know, as he also said in that same interview, the first time he played Liam Rock and Roll Star, that was too quirky and weird for Liam. So it's like, you know, it's all in the eye of the beholder. But he's, you know, and then obviously the album with David Holmes, The Man Who Built the Moon, was a real departure sonically. And those tracks live fit more into his solo catalog, you know, but it was on album a real departure. And then the singles he's done since, you know, the 3 or 4 EPs were the main track was, you know, different, sort of more hacienda kind of dance track, whatever. But the B-sides were all, you know, pretty traditional Noel Gallagher songs, but the way he approached them was different. You know, again, they were like, you know, balalaikas on them and things like that, just different instrumentation. And I think he feels unshackled by his past. You know, he has said to me and to many other interviewers that, you know, David Holmes said to him, instead of saying, don't do that, he said about, you know, sort of rehashing the Oasis sound, he said, you've done that. You almost can't ever do better than that. Why don't you try something else? And I think that really liberated him in a way that is good. Look, he's what? He's 54 years old now, almost 55. He can, you know, he's why would he want to, you know, play Rock and Roll Star, and some may say for the rest of his life? You know, I mean,
it can't.
He's done that. It's time to do other things. And I think that's the mark of a healthy artist and a person who wants to grow. I mean, you're never going to recapture the magic you had as a, you know, 20 something, or even in your early 30s. Certainly when you're, as they say, fat, dumb, and happy as a 50 something year old. But I think the reality is there are other hills to climb, and that's what he's trying to do.
He's in the legendary category now.
Sure.
There's a lot with him coming out at the moment, doing a lot of press, and for him doing the Sky Arts program the other day. I've watched that. I've listened to the interviews. And for me, Jeff, what I've learnt of what he's saying is he's in that time now where he can actually sit back and relax and say, this is where the high-flying birds sit. This is where we are now. Yeah. And you know what? For where my past was, I can't do that anymore, because this is my life now.
Yeah. But I think, look, you know, there's very few role models for doing that. I mean, I think, you know, Pete Townsend to a certain degree, although he always, you know, has the Who to lean back on, but certainly Bowie, Paul Weller, you know, people like that are role models for him in that they followed their nose, so to speak, artistically. And I think that's a great, you know, he's very, very fortunate. The rest of us do that. And, you know, the reality is it's very hard to make money unless you have that big hit early on to fall back on.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly reinventing yourself. And I think that's incredibly frustrating for most fans. He has a core fan base that will follow him wherever he wants to go. And I think that's really fortunate for him. But by the same token, he makes no bones about the fact that he doesn't really care if he upsets the core group. There was a great thread on Twitter the other day. You know, he was interviewed on one of the TV shows, and he said something about how, you know, the putting out the best of gave everybody in his office a job to do during the pandemic. It gave them something, you know. And you know, the Twitter comments were just like beating the hell out of him. And one guy way down the thread said something like, if Liam had said this, you'd all be fawning over it. But because it's Noel, and because he isn't, you know, paying homage to the nostalgia circuit all the time, you just beat the hell out of him for everything he says. And I think there's something to that. He upset in the same way Weller did with the Jam fans. He upset his core constituency very early on, and he continues to upset them by just dismissing reunion talk. But I think, you know, I mean, look, I've talked to him. I've talked to Paul Weller, but I've talked to him as well about all that about that reunion talk. And you know, he's very clear about it. It's like he's done that. It was by and large toward the end a fairly miserable experience and uninspiring experience for him. So really all he'd be doing it for is to go through the motions and take people's money. And it would be great for the people who never got to see Oasis or who want to see them one more time. But that's not a reason to give up essentially 18 months of your life, because they wouldn't be able to do, you know, you can't just do one show for it to be financially feasible. You have to go out on the road and go everywhere. And that means going back, you know, backwards to a place that, you know, a headspace he's not in anymore, nor is his family or everybody in his personal life. You know, he's moved on, you know, so.
But here's something really interesting to ask you. I mean, from being the fan that I am, and you being a singer-songwriter yourself, with Noel having Paul Stacey as someone that is really close with him, that's always in the studio with him, helps play on a lot of his music, and has that person that he can really rely on. I think that's got to be a huge factor for him as well. And I think the team that he has of musicians, I think it's so important to have them people around you. And I think that's got to have a huge impact on what he does, you know, but more so like Paul Stacey and his brother Jeremy. Well,
Jeremy's a great friend of mine. He played on my new record and the one I'm working on now, and a bunch of the guys in Weller's band. And you know, it's like, you know, somebody when David Bowie died, and I interviewed all the guys from his various bands for various articles I wrote. Mike Garson, his keyboard player, said David was like a great casting director. He had the sounds in his head, and he would hire the people he knew could achieve those sounds and more, and then let them do what they did best. I think what Noel has said, and he said this in I think it was Mojo last month, you know, Liam essentially, and this isn't to put down Liam, he does what he does incredibly well, and he's you know, one of the great frontmen of all time.
Absolutely.
But what Noel said was Liam essentially listens to the Beatles and John Lennon every day. And Noel's record collection is all over the place. It's world music, it's Northern soul, it's dance music, it's T-Rex and Slade, it's the Beatles, it's the Sex Pistols, it's Bob Dylan, it's, you know, it's everywhere. And I think, you know, the thing about Strange Boy, Paul Stacey, is that he, you know, he's a really well-rounded musician who can play anything. He hears a lot of sounds in his head, but Noel also isn't afraid to bring in people who can do the things that he can't do, to add flavor to the music. So I think the core tracks are sort of Paul and Jeremy and Noel. And then if Noel hears something else, he isn't afraid to bring those sounds in. And I think the limitation of the latter part of Oasis for him as a creative artist was that they had, the records didn't really sell all that much. They had become a live juggernaut. But he wanted to go other places, but Oasis was really a template. It couldn't be anything other than what it already was. And that wasn't just because the fans wouldn't accept something different. That was because internally within the band, politically, it was just, that was what it was always going to be. It couldn't be anything else. So I think he feels really freed. And I think, he has said to me, we were talking about things we were listening to. Geez, I mean, the last time I interviewed him now was before the pandemic. So I guess it was the fall of 2019. And he was talking about some world music compilation that he just got. And then, had I heard this and, whatever. And it was, and we were talking about, I think there was a Prince box set at the time. Maybe it was Sign of the Times or something like that. And, just like music that was sort of all over the place stylistically, that's a guy who's still searching and still trying to write, he's never going to write Don't Look Back in Anger again, but he might write something that is technically better or will stand this test of time in a different way. Don't Look Back in Anger, Wonderwall, songs like that are so career defining and defining of the era and the period and so forth. And, people have such a strong feeling about them, but that doesn't mean he can't do other, even, significant work, better work, whatever. So he's looking for people to collaborate with who are in that category. I know he and Slick are in contact. I wouldn't be surprised if they do something someday. So it's like he's always a hunt,
I think, like, when we talk about this as well, like over the next 10 years, Jeff, of people that could work with him, I mean, I know Noah said that, he would like the Edge to obviously play on one of his records. We know PW Weller has obviously played on obviously bits and pieces. He says he's made Johnny Marr. Apparently he's made a song with Shawn Ryder, which I can imagine will be actually pretty good. I can imagine that would be pretty excellent because I love Shawn. I think Shawn Ryder is a good person, and I love to have
really
him on
interesting
days.
guy.
Yeah, he is. He really, really is. But it's really interesting for the fans and over the next time period of how things can go.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. It's like I said, those records are all there. The videos are all there. You can dial it up on YouTube or pull out the records or DVDs or whatever it is. And if you want to go see those songs played, there's plenty of tribute bands. And Liam's got his own sort of tribute band and does his own thing that sort of, his records are sort of Oasis light or Oasis-esque or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then you have this other guy who's also doing this other thing. And I get sent people, after I do these interviews, people send me, like their Spotify playlists of like, sort of 4 or 5 Noel tunes and 4 or 5 Liam tunes. Like, this is what the album could have been and blah, blah, blah. And it's just never going to be, but you can do that. If that's what you want to do, you can easily make a best of those two guys and just listen to that. And that can be the 2021 Oasis album for you if you want. I'm sure Liam will, make another record soon enough and he'll be back out playing shows and you'll hear those songs again and everybody can enjoy that. But you're also going to get this other thing. And so I think that's really the best of both worlds in so many ways. I don't know, it's funny, you were saying that the next 10 years, I wonder, I know that Noel doesn't really have any other hobbies. He doesn't really do anything other than, music, sort of like Weller. Weller doesn't really have any, you talk to him about, it's just, he collects records and he plays music. That's sort of it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how much longer, Noel will be doing it. I mean, he said to me, this is a couple of years ago, he couldn't imagine doing it the way like Mick Jagger or Pete Townsend or whatever, but maybe he will find another different way to do it post 60 or 65 or whatever. Maybe it's with an orchestra, or maybe it's with horns, or maybe it's, whatever. So
that's it.
It'll be interesting.
I mean, Weller works really fast. I mean, when obviously, Sunset came out through pandemic, and then suddenly, another few months later, however months it is, we have obviously, the new record come out, Fat Pop. But I think with Weller over the last, let's say, 10 years or so, he's worked very, very fast, and he brings out albums of like 14 tracks, let's say, nearly every year or 2 years or so.
Yeah.
Now, Noel hasn't done that. And could Noel work in that way? Yes. Do I hope he does? Yeah. But then, to be honest, with Weller now, has it got to the point where it's too fast? Because we're going to miss out on, when he starts playing live, are we going to miss out on tracks where you think, well, that's really good, but he ain't going to play it because he's already brought out this, and this. So it feels like...
I think, I talked to him about that. He said that the list of songs he'd sent to the band to learn they're going to start rehearsing in September or October, for October, November, when they start touring. They've got 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsals. He sent them a list of 60 songs to learn. So he really wants to hit on Sunset and Fat Pop and True Meanings, which he didn't really get to tour properly. Sure. So I think he's aware of that in a way that he wouldn't normally be aware. And it's true. It would seem he works fast, but I know that Fat Pop actually took them quite a long time to make. He really honed that and crafted that. And I think the difference is that Paul has his own studio. Whenever he is not at home hanging out with the family, he goes up to Surrey and he can stay there. He is, can sleep there and whatever. He has a studio with people who run his studio for him. And if he wants to create, he can create. And if he wants to hunker down there and make an album, he can. The difference is for Noel now, he's now built a studio in London. Yeah. And I think that will, if he wants to just, he doesn't know anything else. It's either like be at home with the family or party with his friends or record. So I think, it'd be interesting to see how owning a studio and not having to worry about the costs of that changes the dynamic of his creative process, because I think it will, and I think eventually he won't want to go out, even though the money to be made is really on the road now. There will come a time when he does not want to spend a year or 18 months on the road, which is essentially how it works,
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, with this coming out and being the fan that I am, it's sort of a reality check as well, because he ticks on, time ticks on. You start to think about, you've been going to see this man for the last 16, 17 years or so. You start to think, how many more times am I going to see him? Where? What sort of venues am I going to see? How much is it going to cost? And so on. But recently, when he's been out in the media, he's talked about the sort of venues he's going to play live next, right? Which he's saying that the arena thing is not really him. But do you know what? I think that's probably right, because I think the sort of venues he should be playing now is like the Sage in Gateshead, down the road from where I am, Birmingham Symphony Hall. He says he wants to play the theatres, sort of thing. I mean, obviously this is England, but when you look at the world, especially cities like New York, but is he, for the rest of his career, only going to do, and festivals? I think a lot of festivals, and obviously the small theatres, I think that will be where he'll be playing now.
Yeah,
sort of
that's the model. And I think if in England he has to do 2 or 3, 4, 5 nights in one place, and sort of, bop around that way. I mean, he was playing on the, I guess it was the Chasing Yesterday tour. He was playing 2 nights at the Beacon Theater, which is about 3,500 people. And then the last tour, Men Who Built the Moon, he played Radio City Music Hall, like you said, which is, I think, around 5,000 people. I mean, that's probably as big as he could play here in the States. But I could see him doing multiple nights at smaller places. And, I'll tell you, I've played a lot of places myself, and even if just as a support act, the theaters that are more like, 1,000, 2,000, that range, they sound better, they feel better, they're nicer experiences for everybody, not just the performers, but the audience as well. So, this is one of the things that Slick and I have talked about, that when right before Bowie stopped touring, he had his heart problems. The next thing he had planned was doing, say, 5 nights in major cities, and the people would have to come to him. So they'd do 5 nights at Radio City Music Hall in New York, 5 nights at the United in Chicago, 5 nights in LA, 5 nights, like that, and then the fans would have to travel to them. And, he was getting older, and that's how he saw it. And actually, it would have been a better experience for everybody. So I think, he's a smart guy. It is business at the end of the day. He has more people in his band now, so it costs more.
Sure.
But I think he's, I don't think, it doesn't strike me that the cost is really, for what everybody says about him, putting out a best of and wanting to just make money and, all these other things. I don't think the cost really bothers him all that much. I don't think making money is really his motivation. I think he's got plenty of money. And the other thing is, so this month, it's now 12 years since Oasis split, right? And we've now got a best of that covers 10 years. And if you listen to that best of, if you just put it on, it's an incredibly diverse selection of tracks. There's a couple that sort of sound like Oasis, but most of it doesn't sound at all like Oasis. It sounds got more baggy or hacienda or sort of, whatever, Bowie-esque or whatever on. So I think, the next 10 years or so, like you say, will be incredibly interesting. And I have no doubt he will reinvent himself several more times. So but I do think it remains to be seen, because I think not just, the business is changing, but the live music experience is changing, and people are willing to pay maybe a little bit more to see somebody in comfort in a smaller place. And that's just, but we'll see how it changes. I don't think we really know what is going to happen and what shows. I mean, there are obviously a bunch of artists who had tours ready to go or have put out albums and are ready to go out on the road, and they're just going to do what they do. Foo Fighters, Guns N' Roses, people like that. They're just going to hit the road.
Sure.
As things evolve, I think it's going to change. I was literally having this conversation with my agent yesterday, because all of a sudden, a lot of venues are contacting me like, can you come in September? Can you come in October? Can you, another one, there's a music series, an outdoor music series. They sent me a list of, I think, 24 dates. Do any of these work for you? Because they're just trying to fill up their calendars, because they want to get back out there. And this list of 24 outdoor dates, and it's okay. The money's okay. It's a very nice venue, kind of high end and whatever. And my agent said, out of hand, don't even consider it. Just don't do it. Pick the things that you really want to do and don't do anything else. And I thought, I think a lot of people are going to be in that position where, if the money isn't really great, or just right. And I'm not saying right away, I think right away everybody wants to get out there. And it was nice to get out there last week and play in front of people. But I think, I used to do a monthly show. I had a residency here at one particular venue, Hill Country, for 7 years, every month, 7 years. And now we're going to do that probably quarterly instead. Maybe do 2 shows every couple of months.
Yeah.
And like a Friday and a Saturday. And I just think everybody is rethinking it and is going to have to find the way it works for them. The irony of it is, so I've been making, during the pandemic, I've been making a record, and it's, pretty much done. It has a few little odds and ends just to be tweaked, and then it'll be mixed. And we could easily put it out for Christmas time. And I've talked to a few labels, and every one of them have said, put it out next year, because October, November, everybody's looking at sort of February, March, April to put out new product, especially for smaller artists, because October and November are just going to be full of, the Rolling Stones and George Harrisons and Beatles and, Who and everybody else of the world.
Yeah.
Taking everybody's dollars, and more power to them. They have the built-in fan base. But how do you compete with that? And how do you get reviewed in magazines? And how do you get people to pay attention to your little release when you're competing with the big dogs?
Sure.
So, so I'm now in a position. I was talking about this with a friend of mine too, or just earlier today. It's like, by the time that record comes out, I'll already have another record made, probably, which won't come out until 2024. It's like, it's the craziest. So we're all on this sort of conveyor belt without really any model for how to do it. It's all evolving, it's all sort of being reinvented in the moment. So it's a really interesting time and exciting.
Yeah. With the buying of music, I mean, I've bought it all. I've got it all for so many years. I mean, if I was to turn my camera and show you my collection,
same here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all there. Right. I mean, when I was talking to, all of this, all of that, it's all there. Right. But I stream things now on, obviously, this.
Yep.
That's the majority of now how I listen to my music on iTunes.
Sure.
And in one way, Jeff, it kills me that I'm not going to go to a shop anymore and spend 12 quid or whatever it is. But when it's something important or something that means something to us, or I think it's a really great album, I'm going to get it. There's no doubt about that.
Look, we've been trained that music is now free.
Yeah.
So, there are people that we love, that we absolutely love, and we're going to collect it all. We're going to get the deluxe edition, and we're going to get the colored vinyl, and we're going to get, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are a lot of people, and I want to support the artists that I love, just like people buy my stuff who probably don't need those CDs or whatever. But there are a lot of records now that I think to myself, maybe I won't get that one. I've heard it. It's up on Spotify, it's up on Apple Music, it's up on Tidal, wherever, and I've heard it, and that's good enough for me. So we'll see. We'll see how that changes too.
And I can totally relate to that, because isn't it crazy now, right? That you think I'm looking for. Right, I'm going to try and explain this how I think of the situation. Many years ago, when we would go to the shop, when you haven't even heard it, right, you're still going to pay it, you're still going to take it home, and you're going to think it's absolutely amazing, even though you can put it on and think, actually, it's a bit shit. I can't believe I've just fucking wasted the money on that album, right? Now...
Because you're invested in it. Invested in it. Now you don't even give it 10 seconds.
No. Now you just click on the button, and it's just like, I would have gone and bought that, and think, or been talking about it in 2 weeks' time. That album's coming out. You know what? I can't wait. You get it, and you just think, Oh, what an absolute fucking unbelievable that is.
Yeah.
So it just sort of takes the magic away, because the amount of times I've gone, right, Monday morning, I've got 20 quid, I'm getting them 2 albums, I'm good, it's going to be amazing, and everything's great.
Yeah.
It's not there.
No, but look, we also have a lot more choices. There are a lot, we're able to hear a lot more music and be exposed to a lot more music that we were never exposed to in the past.
Yeah.
My kids listen to all sorts of music that wasn't even available to me when I was young. They listen to music from the whole 20th century, let alone what the modern stuff that they're listening to.
Yeah.
I would have killed to be able to listen to this stuff that, I had to go to the library or borrow it from a friend, or, steal it from the local record store if I had to. You had the records you had fit in like one box, and now I've got a whole wall of them. So it's, just the reality of things has changed. But that's a really good point, that you're forced to be more selective. You might just give, would we care as much about a record like Be Here Now if there wasn't a huge buildup? Everybody was so invested in it. It took a couple of months, maybe a year, before people were like, actually, that's not a very good record. Everybody loved it for so long, and it wasn't.
I've got to tell you my story about that album, because obviously I left school in '97, Jeff, right? So when the build up was happening to Be Here Now, I was getting the newspaper every day, just for the shots, what they were going to say about the track listing, everything. You'd obviously get like You and The Enemy and all of that, but you were waiting for the countdown to August the 21st for when that album came out, and what it was going to do to the universe and how amazing it was going to be. And plus, I know where I got it from. I was at Norwich at my nan's, and I had the money for it. And there was that BBC programme on the night before where it was on, I think, 11 o'clock here. Okay. And
right here, right now.
Right here, right now. Everyone had gone to bed. And when Liam and Noel did like Stand By Me by the pool,
right,
in that precise moment, hit me like a ton of bricks, Jeff, because I knew at that precise point they're my favourite band in the world, just because of how beautiful and just the timing.
It's a great song, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it came out. Everyone crazy about it. Everyone went out and bought it. Now Noel thinks it's absolutely the biggest bag of shit. Liam thinks it's absolutely amazing, right?
Yeah, well, it's half a great record,
Yeah.
It's funny how if you took like 4 or 5 of the best songs and 4 or 5 of those really great B-sides, there's a great record there. But and you really can't beat. Do you know what I mean? It's just such a great. It stands up, and even Noel will admit that that's a great song.
And the video,
So
yeah.
But yeah, I feel you. I remember, even here in America, I remember going, being at the record store the minute it opened on the day it came out here. To get it, and there wasn't any fanfare here, but and taking it, I was at a job, and I took it to the job, and I put it on, and it was just like, it was a really, really exciting, special moment, even though, there was a lot I didn't really like, even right off the bat. But and then I saw him on that tour a couple of times, and that was a pretty amazing experience because it was just so huge.
Yeah.
But even here it was huge. But yeah, it's funny to look back on that time and think how just caught up in it we all were, and how, I don't know that kind of thing can ever exist again. I guess for some kids, the whole BTS thing, sort of mirrors that. But I don't know. I'm not really inside that scene, so I don't really understand it the way I can relate to what it was like to be an Oasis fan relative to Radiohead or Blur or Ocean Color Scene, or I mean, Oasis were like so big in that moment, so
Yeah.
it's just, that sort of, Noel talks about it sort of ending at Nebworth, and because he was living it and inside it, what he forgets is from the outside, the aftermath of Nebworth leading up to Be Here Now for fans was just enormous, because it was like, sort of getting all the news reports and seeing the videos trickling out from Nebworth, and then they were making a new record, and they did the American tour. There were some American dates, and then the build up to the record and the singles that came out ahead. Do you know what I mean? And Stand By Me, and so on and so forth, all around the world. It was just such an incredible, sort of cycle to be on. So it was a great time. It was a great time. It's fun to think back on.
Definitely. But you know what, Jeff, as the fans that we are, and Noel can say, oh, it ended like at Networth, and then obviously Be Here Now came out. I don't think that's true, because I think I'm not a huge fan of Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, right? I think Heathen Chemistry was at a time where it was just starting to bubble again because of The Enemy. We had the explosion of White Stripes, Strokes, Hives, the AAS, Kings of Leon.
Yeah.
Obviously the Arctic Monkeys, Kasabian, Coral, you name it. It was all going on with a huge explosion of new bands, the Kooks, Queen of the Stone Age, Foo Fighters still around. Everyone's still around in this huge, massive bubble, right? But Oasis was still making music. And even when Don't Believe the Truth came out, it was still good time periods for other music bands to be around.
Well, and that was a genuinely great record. I mean, Don't Believe the Truth is a very good record. So
yeah.
and it's funny because I talked to I'm buddies with Gary Crowley, the DJ, and I think maybe his favorite Oasis record is Heathen Chemistry. I don't remember, but we had a whole conversation about Heathen Chemistry. So they were around a really long time, and Noel is has an ability to rewrite his own history and contradicts himself all the time.
Yeah.
But those were good times. Those are good tours. The Standing on the Shoulder tour was a great tour. Here in America, they toured with the Black Crowes. It was an amazing tour.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the Don't Believe the Truth tour was probably one of the best shows I ever saw that they did.
Yeah.
So, it's crazy to think. I mean, that version of the band with Gammon Andy, especially the one with Zach Starkey on drums, that was by far, from a musicianship standpoint, the best version of the band.
Totally.
And they had the back catalog to draw on, and some very cool new material that Gam and Andy contributed, and Noel, had taken off a little pressure off him. He had The Importance of Being Idle, which is a great tune. So it's like it was a really interesting time, that sort of mid 2000s period for the band. He just sort of erases it, but I think he's he's got a little PTSD, I think, dealing with it.
Yeah. I want to say to you as well, when we talk about that time period and we talk about Zach, I can honestly tell you now, Jeff, I've seen Zach 3 times live, right? I was twice on that Don't Believe the Truth tour, and I've seen him with The Who. Mm-hmm. Now, I've always loved drummers. I think drummers are amazing. But you know what? I think I'm not just saying this, and I was saying this at the time. I think Zach's the best drummer I've seen, because I just love forget who his dad is for a second.
Yeah.
I just think Zach, his power, the way he plays, he's the best drummer I've seen, Jeff.
Yeah, I've had the good fortune of playing with him one time at a club. he's amazing. And you know, a lot of it is his personality. A lot of drummers don't have much personality.
Yeah.
That's especially true of American drummers more than the English drummers that I know. And no disrespect, I have a lot of great. I played with a lot of great drummers, and a lot of they're great guys.
Yeah.
But I'm, you know, just painting with a broad brush. A lot of drummers are, you know, they hit things for a living, and that's sort of what they do. And no disrespect, but that's very limited. Zach is a really interesting guy with a lot of interests. He likes a lot of different kinds of music, and his personality comes out in his playing. And I will say, you know, standing on a stage with him, and we just sort of jammed. I don't really remember what we played, but it was just stuff we all knew, you know, kind of like classic rock hits. He put so much into it that elevates the song. You know, I just think that was absolutely the best version of Oasis. And you know, Tony just obviously wasn't a great guy, not the right guy for the band.
Sure.
You know, and I never really, I know people love Alan. I never really thought he was the right drummer for Oasis. He was had a little too much of that sort of late 90s jazzy thing that was really, really prevalent. They were really a rock band.
Yeah.
And the thing about Zach as a drummer is he's a rock and roll drummer, but he has that English swing. You know, most American drummers don't really swing. They rock, but they don't roll. And Zach absolutely rocks and rolls. And Jeremy Stacey, I will say, really, really gives that to Noel's stuff. And look, you know, I've said this many times, and I'll get plenty of hate mail because of this, but I think that's the big thing missing from Liam's live band now, is his drummer is just sort of a thrashy, garagey drummer. He doesn't, you know, he's not really a drummer of any merit. And it you know, it limits where the songs can go, both on record, but especially live. You know, a great drummer will elevate things, and a mediocre drummer makes everything kind of mediocre. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, forget the fact that his band has no personality, and they're just kind of okay, average musicians. You know, he is one of the truly great frontmen. He deserves a better band. Yeah. And when you have kind of an okay drummer, it limits how far you can go, I think. So
absolutely,
you know, I've gotten plenty of hate mail about it. It's nothing I haven't said before.
Since Liam's been solo, Jeff, I've not seen Liam solo yet. I saw BDI 3 times, but that's not the same because we know all about that. But I think next time when Liam's on the road, I think me and Susanna will go and see Liam, because I think it would just be at the stage where he will. I've got to go and see him. I've got to obviously go and see him.
Look, it's a really fun show. He plays all the hits.
Yeah.
He's a great front man. You know, no matter what shape his voice is in, and no matter how, you know, what I think of the band. And I think it's just a fact they're mediocre. It's not that, you know, people can defend them, but they just aren't a great band. But it doesn't matter. It's like, it is Liam Gallagher singing those songs. It's a hell of a good time, and the crowd loves it. I mean, they just absolutely love every second of it. And so, you know, I've seen him. I saw BDI as well, which, you know, was pretty disappointing. And I saw and I've seen him solo a couple of times. And you know, it's fun when you're there because you're in a crowd full of people who are loving every minute of it. But you know, on the walk home, you're always kind of like, yeah.
Jeff,
but you gotta go. I mean,
absolutely. When I was 14,
and it's like you said, and I think this is especially true of Liam. It's like, how much longer can they do that? You know, I mean, no, like I said, you know, a little while ago, at some point, Noel can do acoustic or orchestra or, you know, whatever, can sort of reinvent himself. Liam does that thing, and you know, it's hard to imagine him doing what he does at 65 or even 60.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll have to see where he takes it.
Jeff, I mean, like when I was 14, 15, Liam Gallagher was the most important person on the planet to me.
Yeah.
But I suppose when I got to about 26, 27, I just was changing as a person. My life was changing. I was making decisions on my life on which way things are going to go. And I suppose I just fell into the category of going more towards his brother as a fan. With just being influenced by, I mean, I'm influenced by both of them, but
Sure.
the more so, it's just Noel Gallagher is the person I idolize the most.
Sure.
To me, he is the person who influenced me on everything in my life.
Sure.
For definite. But also, what he has said recently, Jeff, and I'm sure you know about this, he has obviously said that at some stage he wants to play Oasis songs with an orchestra, right? Mm-hmm. So, right, if he's going to do this, does he just do it here for like the Teenage Cancer Trust and say, right, I'm going to do this 2 nights, it's going to cost you £100 a ticket, which I think it would be the right thing to do? Or is he going to take it on the road to like places like the United States and places around the world? And with doing that, does he take people like Gem and Andy and or how would he approach that is what I would want to ask him.
I mean, I don't think he's really, he says a lot of things. I don't think he's probably thought it through very much. And maybe he has, I don't know. And there's certainly a plan in place if there is, but I would imagine it would be similar to what Paul Weller did with the BBC Orchestra recently, where he had Steve Craddock and a few guests and so forth.
Yeah.
You know, Gem is a great utility guy and they're really tight. And I think, you know, Gem adds a lot of flavor. You know, they'd be great together. And when they did the Union Chapel gigs and things like that.
Sure.
It was really helpful for him to have Gem there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he took Gem with him.
Yeah.
But you're right. You know, it could be very easily like the Albert Hall for Teenage Cancer Trust, or maybe it's like really nice theaters around the world. Maybe he'd do, you know, the Olympia in Paris or Radio City here, or the Fonda out in LA or places like that. But I don't know. I haven't spoken to him, like I said, in a while. I've heard, you know, I obviously know a lot of the people around him, and Jeremy did the drums for my record at Noel Studio. So I mean, it's not like we don't have some, you know, sort of contact. I think that's also is funny. I was thinking when you were saying about how important he is to you, you know, part of it is colored by the fact that, you know, as a musician, Noel has kept creating new and different things. And that's interesting to me as a creative artist. We're the same age. We have a lot of the same taste. And we both met, you know, we met when we were both going solo, and we had a long conversation about that experience. You know, I think also having met and interviewed both of them, my opinion, and people say this all the time, and it's a fair cop, that my opinion is colored by the fact that I was disappointed. I'm very rarely disappointed in meeting my heroes, quote unquote. And I was genuinely disappointed on a couple of occasions in Liam and interviewing him and meeting him and so forth. And Noel has never been anything but like really fun to be around. Even when we were just talking about, you know, he'd gotten a new dog. The last time I saw him, he'd gotten a new dog, and we were just talking about that for a while, or you know, whatever. He was asking me, you know, I'd written the book about Roy Orbison, and Paul Weller had showed it to him, and he wanted a copy, and we were talking about Roy and whatever. It was just like chit chat. He's just a really fun and interesting guy. He's really funny too, which is you know, it's when somebody's that disarmingly funny, it's fun to be around him. So anyway, so yes, for the fans out there who say my opinion is colored, that's probably part of it. But I also think, like you said, part of it is he is the creative person. And that's, for someone who's a music fan, not just a fan of Oasis, for somebody who continues to create and evolve, that's interesting to me. I'll never not love Oasis. I will always love Oasis circa 95, 96, because they were amazing and sort of were, life-changing or life-affirming, but it isn't 1996 anymore.
No, it's not.
And in so many ways for Liam, it's still 1996 or 7 or 8 or whatever. So
I totally understand it. And I've been thinking about this the last few days and us having this conversation. And I think I can hold my hands up and say, has the High Flying Birds become my new favorite band? Yeah, they probably have, because I've seen them as many times as I've seen Oasis. And the only other band I've seen the most is obviously Ocean Colour Scene, because I lived south of Birmingham. So obviously they're a big part of my heart. But, I've reached out to Russell. I've reached out to Jess and Charlotte. I told Charlotte that I was speaking to you. I told Jess, I told Russell. I've messaged them, as innocent as you can be, to say, about my Simon's Universe of Music. I've said that obviously I was talking to yourself. I would just like them to appreciate that band has helped create Simon's Universe of Music. And the singer, of course.
Yeah.
Because of my love for them as people and their music, it's the biggest inspiration in my life. And for them to do what they do, they have helped, make something which is obviously, going in a pretty good direction. So, I hope when it gets to like 2023, when they say they're going to be back on the road, I will have my chance to, see them in person. If that could possibly happen, and meet him would be, Jeff, I tell you, would probably be the greatest moment in my entire life.
You got to keep your cool, but yeah.
Yeah, and I believe I will. You know what? Yeah. I believe I would.
He's very good at putting people at ease. I've seen him around, and part of it is he'll be a little snarky or whatever, but it puts everybody at ease, and he's really good at that. I mean, he's been doing this a really long time now. So but he, I think he is a music fan, and he does understand what being a fan is.
Sure.
And I just the same way that Weller does. I mean, Weller's gotten really. When I first met Paul Weller, God, 30 years ago or whatever it was, almost 30 years ago, he was a tough nut. I mean, he was, he really tested you and wanted to see why you wanted to talk about this or that or the, what your taste was. And what he's really become, very comfortable in his own skin and a really sweet guy, which I never would have said that about him even maybe 10 years ago. But I really like talking to him. And he always asks about, my family and what I'm up to and my, the friends of mine that he knows. And it's just, look, as a fan, that blows my mind that Paul Weller knows my phone number and, whatever. But the reality is that doesn't make it any less that he's a really nice guy. And I think it's the same about Noel. He has his persona of being this curmudgeon. And that's somewhat true, but he's a lovable curmudgeon, I guess.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about Harry Nilsson.
Okay.
Right.
Before we go, Harry Nilsson.
Harry Nilsson.
Harry Nilsson.
Yeah. I want to talk. So Jeff, someone that I've been listening to for a hell of a long time that I don't really know about, but I think he is one of the greatest singers of all time. I know he was pretty close with John Lennon, which is amazing. But with Harry Nilsson being from the United States of America, what can you tell me about Harry Nilsson, and what's your opinion on Harry Nilsson? Because I just love his voice, and I know some of his songs, and I want to get in to listening to a lot of his music?
Sure. Well, I mean, Harry was a really interesting and complicated and certainly troubled guy. He had a really wild life, and struggled certainly as an artist especially in the early days. But he came. The Beatles became aware of him around 1968 through Derek Taylor, their publicist, and they all fell in love with him. They didn't really know who he was. They just fell in love with his records and invited him over. And he went over to visit. Somehow he got RCA to pay for a promo trip, and he went over to visit and visited the White Album sessions and spent time with each of them individually. And then eventually relocated to England, where he made two, I think his best records, which were Nilsson Schmilsson and Son of Schmilsson. And he was really good friends with Ringo, and as you say, good friends with John. But he knew Paul and George pretty well as well. And those records were produced by Richard Perry, who produced Ringo's Ringo album in 1973, which is, certainly one of the great Beatles solo records. All the former Beatles perform on it. And it has that same touch. It's like the thing about Nilsson Schmilsson and Son of Schmilsson is they have a beautiful pop sensibility, but they're also incredibly quirky. They have really unusual songs on them, mostly by Harry. But the thing about Harry, whether you think of it as a songwriter or a performer, he didn't perform live, but all but a couple of times in his life. There's a BBC program people could look up and that he performed around that time. But the thing people need to know about him is his voice. He was truly one of the absolute greatest singers in the rock and roll genre of all time. He was, look, I think John loved him because he put together this sort of strange and quirky Beatles medley, and it was clever, and the way it was edited and the wordplay was really interesting. I think John fell in love with that. But all of them admired Harry because he was a great guy, and they could party with him, but also because of his voice. He was an amazing singer.
Yeah.
He ended up back in LA, part of the Hollywood Vampires with John and Ringo and Keith Moon, and living in that house in I think Santa Monica, and just having a wild time, and blew out his voice, and had John was producing a record for him, and he didn't have the heart to tell John he'd blown out his voice, and I think it was a shame, because it's a pretty good record for the shape that they were in. And interesting. There is a documentary about him. It's not a very good documentary. It really dwells on the sort of, I think at least half the documentary is sort of his long, slow decline. There's a good biography of him, and there's some great videos on YouTube that people could look up. But the real key period is, he did this a video called The Point, and he did a record of Randy Newman covers, and he did a lot of really interesting things. But those two records in particular, Nilsson Schmilsson and Son of Schmilsson, but especially Nilsson Schmilsson, it's just an amazing record, and that's sort of where you want to start. If you're just sort of getting into it. There's some good compilations. There's an Essential Harry Nilsson on Spotify and other places, for people, and there's some good playlists on Spotify and Apple Music. But that record, it's the great thing about that record is it's something that Harry put out into the world with Richard Perry as a creative artist. So it's his statement. It's the way he wanted you to hear him. And I think that's what's sort of special about it.
I think Jump Into the Fire, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening. That tune for me is absolutely
incredible. Yeah.
Phenomenal. His voice.
He had these amazing players on his record. It's like Mark Bolan and Peter Frampton and Klaus Vormann and Ringo, and I mean, it's just this amazing, group of people playing on. I think Mooney was on some stuff. They were partying hard, but they were also making great music. That's for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
He's just absolutely phenomenal.
He deserves his own episode. Next time we should do a Harry Nilsson episode.
Yeah, I'd love to. Jeff, thank you yet again for your time. It really does mean the world of us.
It's always fun, but it's especially fun when I'm talking to somebody who's also a fan.
Yeah.
You know, and I also, you know, a lot of times I do things and it's within sort of the Beatle world or the Bob Dylan world, because that's what I'm known for. Sometimes Roy Orbison or the, you know, Petty or the Wilburys or whatever. But
yes,
it isn't very often that I get to talk about Noel or Oasis or even Paul Weller. I've done the Oasis podcast. I've done the Paul Weller podcast. I've had an amazing time and a lot of great feedback from people who watch those. So they're a little out of my normal wheelhouse, but I'm a real fan. You know? I can slag off Liam, but that's just because as a fan, I want him to do better. You know, I think he deserves better material. He deserves a better band. I think he should take care of his voice. I think he needs, you know, proper management and guidance and so forth. Because as a fan, I think he should be, you know, the greatest frontman of our generation. I mean, he is. Why isn't he still considered that? Why is he sort of this niche artist? So, you know, Noel gets all the credit for being this great songwriter, and Liam should get more credit.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, Simon. I appreciate it. And hi to everybody out there.
Thank you, Jeff. See you now.